Okay, I've just called the meeting to order. Can we get a roll call vote, please, Eddie?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Reeves.
Here.
Councilmember McKee-Kent.
Here.
Vice Mayor Knight. Mayor Mueller.
Here.
And let it be known for the record that Councilmember Tripp is present. Just step outside for a second.
All right, thank you. Could we all stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance, please? All right, thank you. And I would like are there any changes to the agenda?
Mayor Mueller, we just want to make a note that item 1011A originally had a glitch and was not showing up in our system, but we were able to rectify that. The council received the staff report, the resolution, and all the attachments with it. And you have the most updated resolution, which did incorporate some changes. But this item can be discussed and take action on because it was noticed in the agenda.
Okay, thank you for that. Seeing no other changes, can I get a motion and a second to approve today's, adopt today's agenda?
I move adoption of the agenda.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? None. All right. So with this one, we are going to use the voting system and our buttons to talk, except when you're making a motion in a second.
Correct, Mayor.
All right. So with that, next item, council member announcements. Council member Kent.
Thank you. I want to remind the public, anybody that wasn't here in the last meeting, that in October, on Thursday the 19th, and the next week on Tuesday the 24th, we have the second 2 of 3 emergency preparedness meetings with Firewise, an organization that will teach homeowners how to harden their house and the surrounding area in the event of a wildland fire, and then with Red Cross, which will be extremely informative for how to take care of yourself in the event of emergency, yourself, your family, especially if it's outside of the area and first responders are busy taking care of more urgent situations. So I do hope the public will be there. Thank you.
If anybody else has any announcements, you can use your buttons to speak. Seeing none, I am moving on to tonight's proclamations. We have 2 proclamations, and the first one is one on Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I believe that we have, yes, come on up and.
I'm Tracy Lamb.
Oh, Tracy, thank you. Okay, so I'll read you the proclamation, and then feel free to say a few words afterwards.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you very much. This proclamation is in recognition of Domestic Violence Awareness Month, whereas news, domestic violence and sexual abuse services in commemorating 42 years of service to survivors of domestic violence in Napa County, having opened the first confidential safe house on October the 5th, 1981, and began providing safety to those escaping abuse. And whereas domestic violence is a public health concern that impacts the well-being and success of individual community members as well as the community as a whole. And whereas in fiscal year 22-23, News provided services to nearly 1,800 of our Napa County community members, including 24-hour response, assistance with protective orders, safety and shelter, permanent housing, financial aid, support groups, and children's services for issues related to violence in the home. Whereas in fiscal year 22-23, News served 9 clients from the town of Yountville, including children. The News helpline received 47 calls for assistance from Yountville residents. Clients in Yountville received emergency assistance and crisis intervention services, court advocacy, and accompaniment, including help preparing and filing restraining orders and support for our kids exposed to domestic violence program. And now, therefore, let it be resolved that I, Margie Moeller, Mayor of the town of Yountville, along with the town council, do hereby proclaim October 2023 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month and encourage all residents of Yountville to honor domestic violence survivors and those who serve them during this month and throughout the year. Congratulations, and please say a few words. I need to sign this and then hand it. I'll come back and hand it to you.
Thank you, Mayor Mueller. I'm Tracy Lamb. I'm the Executive Director at News, Domestic Violence and Sexual Abuse Services, and I'm very honored to be here at the town of Yountville to accept this proclamation. Unfortunately, domestic violence is a thing that happens in every community and every place that you live, and it affects not only those 9 families or however many it was that we served, but then there's a ripple effect to that, to the entire community. And so taking this time out to really have a moment to recognize that and to think about the families that you know, the people that you're close to who may have been affected by this, and to know that there is a resource out there to help them 24/7 in English and in Spanish. We really encourage you to utilize our services where needed, and to know that we're here to help when that happens. I brought with me, for hot off the press, our annual report, which gives a more detailed description of the services that we provide. So I wanted to share those with you. I'm really proud about that. And again, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to read all those words. Thank you.
I'll just put them on the table for our clerk to handle them for us. Thank you. So here it is. It's all signed.
Thank you.
Congratulations, and thanks for coming.
Can I say one more thing? And that is that the town of Yountville supports News every year, and we receive a gift from you, from your town, and we appreciate it very much, and I wanted to mention that. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask you a quick question. Is there a phone number or a way that if we heard of someone in need or something, is that in your annual report?
It is, and the number is easy to remember because it's 707-255-NEWS. Okay. So it makes it easy to remember, and that's 24/7. And even if it's not like what you think of as violence, if it's someone who's in an unhealthy relationship and struggling, they don't have to leave, they don't have to make a decision, but just to talk to someone on the phone, to get support anytime, they can do that, and then we can work it out with them. We're there to support them no matter what.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Our second proclamation is a Clean Air Day proclamation. The person who was going to be here to receive it had a personal issue and wasn't able to attend, so I'm going to read it from the dais tonight. In recognition of California Clean Air Day 2023, which is going to be October the 4th, 2023. Whereas the town of Yountville is dedicated to the health and well-being of its residents, visitors, and the environment, and whereas the town of Yountville is committed to reducing emissions and has begun to create an electric vehicle fleet through a mindful replacement program, and whereas the town of Yountville residents and businesses participate in organic waste recycling, organic waste in landfills contributes to 20% of the state's methane. Methane is a climate super pollutant, 84 times more potent than carbon dioxide, and whereas on March 15, 2022, the mayor and the town council issued a proclamation declaring that the climate emergency exists and committed to providing leadership and services in partnership with residents, community organizations, businesses, Napa County, and regional jurisdictions to educate, mobilize, and accelerate support for comprehensive and sustained climate action to reduce harmful environmental impacts and strive to achieve a goal of net zero carbon pollution. And whereas on April 18th, 2023, the mayor and the town council issued a proclamation declaring a climate emergency. And whereas clean air is essential for human health, quality of life, and preservation of our natural surroundings. And whereas air pollution poses a significant threat to public health, contributing to respiratory illnesses, cardiovascular disease, and other adverse health effects. And whereas climate change driven by the emission of greenhouse gases threatens our community with increased temperatures, extreme weather events, and other environmental challenges. And whereas the California Clean Air Day is an annual event aimed at raising awareness about the importance of clean air and encouraging actions that reduce air pollution and combat climate change. And whereas by participating in California Clean Air Day, we can collectively reduce our carbon footprint, improve air quality, and take meaningful steps toward a healthier and more sustainable future. And whereas the town of Yountville recognizes that local actions have global impacts and is committed to doing our part to protect the environment and promote clean air for all. And now, therefore, let it be resolved that I, Margie Moeller, Mayor of the town of Yountville, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the laws of California and the state of California, do hereby proclaim October the 4th, 2023, as Clean Air Day. By working together on California Clean Air Day and throughout the year, we can create a cleaner, healthier, and more vibrant community for ourselves and future generations. Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I just had a comment about that proclamation. Since it's an annual event, and I hope that we proclaim it so every year, I'm wondering if we, if not this year, but next year, be able to raise the Earth Day flag on Clean Air Day as a sort of visual reminder for the community and to reaffirm that idea that it's all connected and we should be all thinking about it in many ways.
Okay, we can take that under advisement. Thanks for the suggestion. Seeing nobody, no more buttons, I am going to move along. This is a time for public comment on anything that is not on today's agenda. Seeing nobody coming forward, I'm going to move on to our consent calendar. Any changes to our consent calendar today? Seeing none, I will ask for a motion and a second. We're not using our buttons. We're making a motion. I'll keep reminding all of us.
Move adoption of the consent calendar.
Second.
We have a
Second.
motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? That passes unanimously. All right. Thank you very much. Guest presentations, we have none. We have one public hearing today, and we are going to be discussing the tree ordinance. So can we start out with a staff report, please?
Yeah, before Diane starts the staff report, I want to, reintroduce Tony, who introduced himself during the study session earlier. So why don't you come on up here, and Diane can stay back there, and you can work together. But If you don't mind, take a minute to introduce yourself and share some of your experience with the council and the community. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you. Tony Wolcott, and as far as experience and things, I have sort of quite a bit of that, and I won't bore you, but when I graduated from university, I was a school teacher and taught math and English for a few years, but always wanted to be outside and working on plants and stuff, having kind of a farming background. And so I started a farming or a landscaping business and went into trees and eventually got into different classifications. My qualifications are sort of, I'm a certified arborist with the ISA, and I remember your council meeting from last time is, what's a certified arborist? Is it a license? Is it not? Well, it's not a license, but it's a classification, it's a qualification, and it's handled by the ISA, or the International Society of Arboriculture. And there are also certified tree workers, and you'll see those also advertised as well. But certified tree workers know how to handle a tree and know how to work in a tree and things like that, but they're not a certified arborist. I'm also a board certified master arborist, which is the highest qualification you can have with the ISA. Requires a different and more difficult test to pass, and also experience and things like that. I'm also a registered certified consulting arborist with the American Society of Consulting Arborists, and that's a sort of unique distinction. It requires a week at an academy, going through all sorts of writing exercises and also information and stuff, and then being able to pass that by writing 3 different reports and stuff. So, and since then, I've been about 8 years now writing hundreds of arborist reports, and I've been an independent consultant. Which is advantageous because I'm not selling the business of trimming this tree or removing this tree, but just being an analyst for and look at tree assessments and what we can do or should do with them. As far as my work experience, I worked with the City of Albany as their urban forester for 4 or 5 years. Also was the urban forester for the City of San Francisco, and also spent 4 or 5 years with Bartlett Tree Experts, learning sort of the expert side of the tree business and also of arboriculture. So I've done a fair amount of things, and the consulting aspect of it I really like. But I particularly like this opportunity because Yountville is the size of a town that you can kind of wrap your arms around, and you can work with people and get to know them. And working together, we can sort of accomplish quite a bit. And again, from your last couple of council meetings that I've viewed, I almost felt like you were talking to me because I wanted to say, I know that. I can help with whatever questions that you might have, and we can sort of go forward with that. And
Well, thank you, Tony. We're welcome. And just as a kickoff to Diane's presentation, as you know, we've been talking sort of about a 2-step process here. And we started that process at the meeting. It was actually my first meeting here, where we listened to the council and then we took some direction, and then have now come back with a staff report that has gone through ZDRB and is before you this evening. We also understand there's a next step, which is kind of this bigger question of what else do we want to do. And we knew we needed someone like Tony here to advise the council in order to get to that next step. I'm going to add sort of at least the idea of an additional step, which in essence would be after this afternoon, and we can hopefully take action on what's in the agenda, and we can move forward. Whatever else is discussed, what I would advise council is we can come back with another staff report that in essence would clarify what we heard and make sure we're taking the proper next step in terms of further direction before we go back to ZDRB and then come back again with whatever amendments to the ordinance. So what I would say, and I know Tony did review the tapes for both you all and the ZDRB, so he has that background, but I think that conversation and how that can be open, and then we'll come back make sure we got it right before we go to that formal second step, which would be whatever the next look at the ordinance is. So hopefully that makes sense to you all, but I do think, Diane's prepared to talk through what is in the staff report and what is on the agenda this evening, and we're all available, obviously, to help through these important issues. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor Moeller, Vice Mayor Knight, and members of the board. So the minor text amendments for your review are a result of Council's direction that came out of the July 18th meeting, where Council was provided an overview of the town's tree ordinance. As indicated in this discussion, that discussion, and the staff report provided to you, this is an initial step in a larger process, like Town Manager Ralston was just explaining, and so we'll just take this one step at a time, and then we can have a larger discussion after review of this ordinance amendment. Additionally, I did want to point out that there were 2 small grammatical errors in Exhibit A that was provided to you. You may not have even noticed them. They were part of the redlining that I did to delineate between the changes. Those did not go into the final ordinance. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. The amendments that would add a procedural element to the tree removal permit process. It would require a notice to be sent out to all owners within 300 feet of the subject tree that's requesting a removal. This does include a 10-day comment period where staff will receive comments if there are any and take those into consideration alongside the application. And to note, ZDRB at the September 12th meeting that was held in order to provide council with a recommendation did recommend approval with the clarifying component that notices should not be sent out to those applications where it's expected that the tree removal will not be approved. Next slide. The second component of this is that the town consulting arborist, Tony, who we're now in the 3rd introduction of tonight, we're happy to have him, that he would be conducting all the reports related to the proposed tree removal permit application, opposed to an applicant hired arborist. The town consulting arborist also would conclude whether a tree is dead and therefore falls under exception B1, which is the exception that a permit is not required because the tree is dead. So as we are doing now, if we get an application from an arborist or from a member of the public, and with that there is an arborist report from somebody they hired, we now have the requirement that that Tony would also have to come to that conclusion. And lastly, we are just adding a definition of the town consulting arborist to definition section within Title 17. And that's all we have with these amendments. And with that, we have the ordinance 23-524, and we can begin discussing the next steps. I think Brad or Gary was going to provide a little direction on how we should move forward.
Yeah, happy to, Mayor and council members. So as a follow-up to the introduction from your town manager about providing some guidance today, happy to provide that feedback. Given the agenda title here, we're limited in some respects on what's before you this afternoon, but can certainly take the feedback in the direction and then return at some future meeting for some other further future amendments.
Thank you with that. So I'm going to start with council questions for Diane and the staff regarding the staff report. I see no council members requesting to speak. Oh, I do see we have Vice Mayor Knight who would like to speak.
Just a question for Diane. Thank you. I listened to the ZDRB meeting last night, and one of, in terms of, and I just want to say first, I really believe that this is really a great first step, bringing on a town arborist and realizing we have to take this as a step-by-step process. But in listening to the meeting last night, I heard concerns from the chair of the committee and from Michael Bork, who's here today, concerned about prominent trees in the community that may be considered pyrophytes, and so we have in this item. So my concern really for what we're approving today is we have some very prominent coastal redwoods in this community. Are they and in our ordinance, when they define pyrophyte trees, they name 3 or 4 that are pines. And what little research I did on the internet, which is always dangerous when you're not an expert, when you look up the word pyrophyte, there's passive pyrophytes like coastal redwoods and sequoias, or there's active pyrophytes like pines that have oily saps and are explosive. So just for the short term, since we're highlighting our tree ordinance now, are the coastal redwoods that are prominent, and there's 2 of them I can think of right now on like Jefferson Street, are they protected from, is this highlighted process protect them, or at this point, or would we need to make changes to do that?
Well, so there's a couple different things I'd like to know in response. One would be I'm not aware of redwoods being considered pyrophytic, at least in the experiences that I've had. I believe the tree on Jefferson, which has been a large discussion, was a Douglas fir. And yeah, there are differences in the pyrophytics, and what I was concentrating on was the ones that do require fire for reproduction, essentially, but I'll let Tony get into any expertise. The second part, as far as protection, I think that these amendments do protect it in the sense that now we have an expert on hand. He'll be conducting the arborist reports for any removals that are applied for, but as far as pyrophytic, it would just be we have an expert now here, with the town.
And I appreciate that, because when I looked on that website in terms of this definition, they talked about pyrophytes, passive, active, and then pyrophytic or philic trees that really are trees that require fire to whereas passive pyrophyte trees are resistant to fire, like redwoods and things like that. So our language doesn't say pyrophilic, or it says pyrophyte trees. And so that's the clarification I want, since we've kind of opened this up is a discussion about this ordinance. Thank you.
So if I can jump in, this is one of those things where it seems to have gone off the wheels as far as the understanding of what we're talking about. Pyrophytes, word pyro means fire, phytes means the love of. So we're talking about plants that need fire, that have to have fire in order to reproduce. And in California's landscape, especially the chaparral plants, Mediterranean climate, if you will, there are a lot of pyrophytes, manzanitas, toyons, a variety of trees as well that require fire. Otherwise, they don't regenerate. Okay, and that's just their adaptation to the type of environment and climate California had long before humans were here. And it developed to the point where fires were commonplace. Lightning would start a fire, it would just burn out, and these manzanitas would amazingly sprout out. That's the only time you'll see them sprout out and seed is after they go through a fire. Now, I've worked on large fires where after my job was to go out there and examine the trees, said this tree should be cut down because it's going to fall, and this tree's going to be fine. And then all of these other plants, these California native plants, most of them were pyrophytes, and they came back just wonderfully. Okay, so we kind of, when I read this in the ordinance, I just cringed, because pyrophytes should not be used as a term to describe trees that will burn or will burn more than other trees. Okay, the reason pines are flammable is because they have only one defense against insect and disease attack, and that's to flood it with sap. All right, and Monterey pines in particular, because they get pine pitch canker, not only flood it with sap, they literally, it's a river of sap coming down the trees. So there, if a fire gets near that, it's going to burn like a torch. Now, the other thing, I'm sad that the CAL FIRE people aren't here, because they would verify this and help a little bit with me. But when I did the Santa Cruz fires, oftentimes it was in with houses and trees, and the trees would burn. But you know what really burned were the houses. Trees burn about 500 to 600, 700 degrees. Houses start at about 1,500 and go up to 2,500 degrees, because houses are so flammable. And they not only are flammable, but the heat is unbelievable. And so you see things like huge metal cans completely melted on the ground. It was that hot. And so you want to be careful of, what you say in your ordinance to make sure that you have sort of the correct nomenclature for it, okay? So sure, it's oftentimes municipalities, and I've dealt with several of them, that have outlawed the planting of certain trees, Monterey pine being one of them, okay? Now, the other thing that makes me cringe is that we throw out terms that refer to a whole bunch of species, and we need to talk just about a particular species if we want to get rid of it, okay? One of them is that prohibited trees on our list is acacias. Okay, there's over 100 species of acacias, okay? They're all very different. Most of them are desert or drought tolerant, and there are a few bad ones. And if you look on, there's a website called CalIPC, which is California Invasive Plant Council, and there they have a list of all of the invasive plants. There are a few acacias on that list, all right? But there are some really good acacias, okay? And when we talk about trees, we talk about binomial nomenclature, which means that a tree has two names, its genus and its specific epithet, and that's the name of the species. And so we want to be careful, and you're going to get irritated with me because I'll speak in Latin a lot, and I have to do that because that comes in first, and then the common name, which changes from country to country or from locale to locale or from, believe me, from block to block as to what they call that tree. The common name comes second. We need to know the scientific name to know what we're talking about, okay? So just a word of caution, the word eucalyptus is a swear word, and I don't like it when people swear, okay? There are over 300 species of eucalyptus, okay? There are eucalyptus that only grow on the ground, eucalyptus that are shrubs. So be careful when you talk about, oh, I hate those eucalyptus. The eucalyptus that's out there in the center of the highway, the one that's pregnant, right? Beautiful tree, Eucalyptus globulus, blue gum. It's the one that has naturalized the most in California. And in other words, it seeds itself and it will regenerate everywhere. So it's an invasive tree. Yes, an invasive plant. All right, that's got a few things off my chest. I'm sorry.
When you're done.
I apologize. I knew this was going to get us into an intense conversation of why and the reason why we hired you, and I appreciate all that. My only issue on this is that we're looking at an ordinance that we are reviewing, we're highlighting in the community, and my just general sense from a quick review of this is that it seems like the terminology that we're allowing the exemption for not following our process is too broad. It was too broad of a term using prior fight. So my question only is, I want us to move forward. I want us to have you do more work on this ordinance, on our tree ordinances. That's why we brought you along, to improve. But what do we do here in terms of I don't want to provide a large path for someone to, in the interim, while we're improving this ordinance, to remove without a large prominent tree in this community. And it seems like so what do we do to move this forward, protect are prominent trees that may be, and until we can reclassify our ordinance. So thank you.
Is that a question for Diane?
Yes, I mean, I can think of two suggestions. Either maybe in this ordinance change, we suggest using a layman's term and say that we use the term active pyrophyte, which all the trees that were described here are the ones that are sappy and oily, or we take a broader decision. We say that any tree over a certain DBH has to go through a more review process, because then that will protect these trees that are 2 feet, 2.5 feet in diameter. So that's what I just want to be sure we address today. If we're making, and maybe we can do that with just a light minor change to the ordinance to allow and protect these trees while we review it in the near future. I
think Gary will maybe be able to provide some boundaries and that might allow for what you're trying to accomplish here. I can also say that from the discussion that was just had and how I had explained that's the way I was viewing the term pyrophyte, even though that's the broader terminology. I don't see a bunch of pyrophytic trees or pyrophytes coming for removal and getting removed within, the next few months. But I understand your concern absolutely. And I don't know, Gary or Brad, do you want to outline some of the possibilities and
Before you do that, I would just like to ask a question again, just to Vice Mayor's comment. You used the word protect because they're old and large several times. So maybe we can again have our arborist briefly weigh in on, should we as a community really protect these trees? I mean, how dangerous are they? I mean, if they really have a lot of oily, sap and can really catch on fire and become, a torch. This is a really large tree. It could become a really large torch. So, I mean, how do we look at that?
Well, I think the point is I'm not an expert. I'm just worried about language put in an ordinance that I'm just concerned where we're talking about exemptions. We're doing great work to provide additional review before. So I just want to be sure we don't leave just a wide gap in this ordinance. Why we review it in case someone wanted to remove a tree that would be defined and exempt, where they could make the argument this is a pyrophyte tree and I'm exempt and thanks, but I've got my arborist that said it's dangerous, and I just want to be sure we have a good review of what are prominent and in our community almost ancient trees. I know I'm saying they're very prominent, very large, and let's just be careful about what we approve. So thank you.
So, Attorney Bell.
Yeah, I just want to add one comment in response to that. So this is an existing exemption, obviously within the code, and that's carried over. The reason why it's restated here is there are other provisions that are being modified here, but this exemption has existed and would continue to exist if you all move forward with the ordinance that's before you right now. A couple notes, though, on the exemption. One, it's not a defined term, pyrophyte, but in the way that we construe ordinances, it's the same way for statutes. We have a comma and then including, and it specifically lists things. So the things that follow in the list there, even though pyrophyte is a broader term, the things that follow that in the list is what that exemption applies for as currently drafted. And your town staff continues to administer the ordinance. I don't believe this has ever been interpreted broadly to include what the arborist just described as being a very broad class of trees.
Councilmember Tripp, I see your name on the...
Yeah, I didn't know if you catched your screen. I wanted to speak to this issue because I agree with Eric, and I do understand what Gary's saying, but in my previous life as a lawyer, if someone brought this ordinance to me and said, I have a redwood tree, and then I also, like Eric, looked up, and I'm actually talking against my own interest here because I have 3 very big redwood trees. I would go on Wikipedia, which says redwoods are pyrophytes, and I would say to my client, "No, the ordinance says it's exempt, so go ahead and cut your tree down." So I do understand how we're interpreting it, but I think there would be a very arguable case that the person could cut the tree down. So my question is, and I have very clearly understood what Brad was saying, that we will get another chance to look at this again, although we did have quite a lengthy pyrophyte discussion at the last meeting. So I just want to note that. We did make that clear, several of us, that was really a concern, although I know the mayor feels a little differently about some of the trees, especially the redwoods and pines. I would want to be sure this comes back, but my question to Gary is, because I think that there probably is support here to make sure that the redwoods are included in the tree ordinance, and actually I would be in favor of all trees over a certain size. I'm coming to have I think this whole concept of Monterey pines and whatnot, given the climate issues and the need for shade and how all the trees in Yountville can provide visual impacts, this idea that certain trees are disposable, I think has kind of come and gone. Also, just in terms of carbon. So I would be in favor in general of all trees over a certain height would need to be reviewed through the permit process, but I certainly think sooner rather than later we need to do redwoods. And I would just ask Gary, if we decided to clarify today that redwoods did require a permit, would we be able to do that given how this has been agendized?
That would need to be direction provided to staff, given the agenda title for this afternoon's meeting. So that we would need to bring that back at a future meeting.
Okay. And then my final question would be, and if we need to be sure that this issue does actually come back, you could let me know whether we need to make a motion. But I would be interested to know whether this concept of some trees being kind of disposable or dispensable for a variety of reasons. I always thought it was fire, but it's also pines tend to have shallow roots, and I understand sometimes fall over more. I'm not sure how pines got such a bad name, but I guess my question would be, besides redwoods, which I think at least the majority here probably want to protect, are there other trees that we absolutely should allow people to cut down without a permit versus just having permits for trees of all trees of a certain size, I guess? Was that question clear? Are there certain trees that you could legitimately, or maybe that would be a question to come back. Are there certain trees that we legitimately should say could be cut down without a permit, notwithstanding their size?
From my viewpoint, you must review it. Okay, and it's very common in municipalities to give a certain size of the DBH, and once you get to that size or larger, it's certainly going to require. They're protected trees. Doesn't matter what the species is. Okay, so and I would be deathly against. Allowing people to remove trees without review at all.
Because our current ordinance, I don't know, because it appears in two places, it's a little complex, but basically you don't need a permit if it's a certain type of tree.
Yeah,
okay.
But we've got work to do.
Yeah, okay.
And I just also kind of want to clarify that, I'm not anti-protecting trees, if that's being suggested at all. I'm just saying sometimes you have to balance, and we have to have that discussion, something that's truly a safety issue, like we're talking about tonight, like a pyrophyte. I'm not talking about other types of situations, but, so maybe that's something you can bring back at another time for,
It is, yeah.
helping us kind of balance something that's really large and, prominent in our community versus, something that is truly dangerous. How do we, balance those two difficult
Right.
issues?
Yeah, you take into public safety and aspects like that about trees and also their condition. And there's all sorts of reasons, but that's why we need to have them reviewed.
Okay, thank you very much. And I just have one more follow-up question since you're here. And this won't be under tonight's discussion, but since you're here and we are going to make comments about what we'd like to see maybe in the future, when we we've in the past, and we do currently have a Heritage Oak database, Quercus, for those of you who speak Latin, and I'm just wondering if, will that be something that we need to put in here as something routine, or is that something that will be a normal part of your process to do an inventory?
Yeah, it would be, and the ordinance itself has some room for heritage trees. It's more difficult to remove a heritage tree than it is a protected tree.
Right.
Things like that are already in the ordinance, but I think there's some work that needs to be done as far as that goes. Your list of heritage trees includes almost all valley oaks, Quercus lobata, and so it. We always talk when we tell people about tree planting and tree choices is that we want diversity. And so we like to see diversity in genuses and diversity also in families of plants and stuff. So that part of it's important as well. But so, yeah, and does that answer it a little?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. Councilmember Reeves.
I would support this ordinance as it's written, unless we could strike the word pyrophytic. That would be great, but I wanted to ask the other council members if they wanted to wait on the provisions of this ordinance another couple of weeks, maybe a month. That's a bigger, wider hole of opportunity than passing this now and coming back with the next piece. That's just my thoughts.
I'll respond to that. I think that's a great idea. I think that there's a couple important changes up here. I'd like to see if what the staff thinks in terms of urgency about doing this versus having a broader conversation later.
Well, I think the onboarding of the town's consulting arborist is a huge benefit to the town, and I think that if we adopt this as is tonight, then we can get going on that, and it wouldn't create an imposition to implement the changes that the council desires, in a month or so, because my understanding is that from this discussion, we are going to generate our next steps, which could occur in the next, 1 to 3 months, say. But if you don't choose to approve this ordinance, we will have to revise it, and then we will have to go back to ZDRB first and get their recommendation, and then come back to you. So you're going to have a lot more lag time than you might be anticipating.
So if we approve it tonight, including the word pyrophyte, and then, we give you a lot of input later on, then we could always remove that or clarify it or modify it at our second go-around.
Absolutely, and I think that is also, with Tony available, you can weigh that out more. You have more time to make the correct decision in the best interest of the town and its residents.
Okay, Councilmember Tripp.
So just so that I understand, Diane, I think what you're saying is in order to have Tony in place and a way to make sure that he's involved in the process and retained by the permittee, we need to pass this. Otherwise, I mean, that's part of the ordinance. That's an important part, I guess. Without that, we won't have a consulting arborist. Is that correct?
It's correct in the sense that I don't know whether we would lose Tony or not per se, but it would not be required, nor could we require him to be conducting arborist reports that we receive in the meantime.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just finish my comment. I kind of agree with what Pam was saying, but to me the factor in terms of doing it all at once and maybe considering it from a larger picture, but when I realized the importance of having the consulting arborist involved, that weighs a little differently to me. Yeah.
And I would just add, the work is done, right? So, this is before you for action. I do think if you take it, it fills a few of the gaps that were clear based on the comments we were hearing. And it sounds as though, I mean, I know that we're proposing kind of this two-step process for the second phase of this. It could be a three-step I mean, this is obviously a very complicated issue. So I haven't even talked to Tony about how long he needs in order to, it's going to be based, I think, on what he hears tonight partially, but also like he's going to need whatever time he needs in order to prepare for that. So, again, I think the work's before you. It does definitely fills some gaps. Our recommendation, of course, is to adopt it. So I would make that suggestion, and we'll continue. It's not going to slow us down on the second part of it.
Vice Mayor Knight, question?
No, just that just in a discussion, I'm ready to move the ordinance. I don't want to delay the ordinance.
I need to go ahead and take public comment.
Okay.
Then we're going to make a motion, and we can have more
Thank
rounds
you.
of comment if that
Thank
works.
you. Thank you very much.
Okay. So with that, do we have any public comment on this item? Please come up and state your name for the record.
I am Michael Bork, and I live on Jefferson Street. So I've been chomping at the bit to come up here and talk. And I thank you, Vice Mayor Knight, for the comments that you made, because most of those I was going to make as well. As I mentioned to our new arborist, I'm a 30-minute internet expert now on trees. But first, well beyond that, I feel very moved by trees. I think there's no tree we should tear down. If it's possible to do, I would pass this and remove 4B2. There should be no exclusion that allows any tree to be cut down without going through a permit process. And I mean, my favorite property, I mean that sarcastically, is 6630 Jefferson, which is just south of your property, the one where they improperly tore down the house. There's a giant tree on there. I presume it's a redwood. What's to say they go there on tomorrow and tear it down? There's nothing here that stops them. And I want to point out that there was a beautiful Douglas fir almost across from you that went down without any. There was no reason why it would have been stopped based on the current codes that we have. That was completely allowed to do.
Michael, can we just ask you to a little bit get closer to the microphone because it's
Okay.
having hard.
That was complete. Is it even okay? That was completely allowed to do, and that was a travesty as far as I'm concerned. Now, ultimately, it does turn out that there were reasons to tear that tree down, but there was no process that stopped that and created any opportunity for an arborist, had one been employed at that time, to review it. So, as you said, there are active and there are passive. And as our arborist said, no tree should be allowed to be torn down without there being a process that allows it to be considered. As Councilmember Tripp mentioned, we have ecological issues with carbon capture and all those other kinds of things. We're not in a place like Paradise where we're nestled a bunch of houses amongst all these trees. We've gone through massive fires recently, and that isn't to say that we couldn't have some sort of disaster, but we're not sitting in a big giant grove of trees that can go up like torches. So if it's possible to do, I say pass this thing and get rid of B42. Don't create any exclusion opportunity for any tree here over a certain size. Thank you.
Do we have any other public who'd like to speak? Yes, Mr. Van Gorder.
Hello again. So I'm Mark Van Gorder, Local Government Affairs with Pacific Gas and Electric. I just wanted to make a brief comment, or at least share the role of the utility for safety and reliability. So we regularly come through communities throughout our service territory, and we will perform annual inspections and evaluations to meet the requirements of the California Public Utilities Commission to keep tree branches or trees back away from the lines. And so one of the things that this town has experienced within the last year and prior to that is a number of outages on our lines because tree limbs or full trees or the animals living in and around the trees hitting the lines and causing power outages. And now that we have the enhanced power safety settings, we have that more frequently. That's not counting the cars into poles and Mylar balloons and other things that cause outages. So I would just state that we regularly work with town staff, usually Public Works. We file encroachment permits when we're working in public rights-of-way, sidewalks, roads, and other locations, parks. Private property, we don't notify the city or the town. We do talk with the private resident. So I just want to make the note that we regularly and always have performed routine work on every tree that needs it, dead, dying, diseased, or just needs to be trimmed back. And then depending on the amount of growth that we might project, we're going to trim it back far enough so that it, in that time period of a year, isn't growing back into the tree lines, because we can't come back and prune the tree every 2 weeks or month. We're going to keep it cut back for about a year. So I just want to make sure that you are aware of our process as a utility, and that the CPUC governs what we do, how we do, and makes certain mandates, and that we will file for the encroachment permit, but don't file for discretionary permits. I haven't seen a discretionary permit that we've filed or come before a planning commission, design review board, council, for public comment, public hearing, that sort of thing. So that's typically our process, and that's the way I've seen it work with every city in my 2 counties, which is Marin and Napa. Just wanted to share that information with you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We do see a lot of trimming of trees in very interesting fashion by the utility companies.
And Mayor, thank you for, first of all, bringing that up, because I think, there are a few instances where local control is lost as it relates to trees. Utilities are one, and I would just share with you that state housing laws are another. So although we can have an ordinance, in certain cases, other laws supersede our ability to control that. So that's something that the council community needs to be aware of, because in some cases trees are coming down outside of our control.
Thank you very much for that. So now I'm going to bring it back to council and ask the council to make a motion and a second, and then we will have a discussion on that motion.
Go ahead.
Nope.
I'm happy.
Well,
Okay.
You got to hit your button.
I will have
You got to hit your button, or I'm not going to let
Thank you.
There you go. All right. Now we have a request to speak. So we're following a new process here. I understand. So, all right, Vice Mayor Knight.
I'm actually ready to make a motion if we can, and then I have a question that will be a part of a discussion of the motion. So I'm happy to make a motion.
Okay,
now.
I'll let you know. We're going to give everybody at least 2 opportunities to go by for any discussion or final questions. Go ahead and make a motion.
Okay, thank you. I move adoption of ordinance number 23-524, an ordinance to the town council, and waive the reading.
I will second that. Okay, now hit your light. And Vice Mayor, would you like to speak on your ordinance?
Well, actually, a question for the town attorney in addressing the question from the resident, Michael Bork. Are we limited in terms of, and this is kind of it's kind of a review of what we do when we change ordinances. This ordinance is defined, even in the ordinance, talks about hiring an arborist and review of tree removal permits. So are we limited in the ability to make a suggestion about removing any other part of the language of the tree ordinance as the current ordinance is defined today?
The council can certainly direct staff to come back on any particular amendment or piece of this ordinance. What limits your discussion and your action this afternoon is how the agenda title is described. So the agenda title includes public notice and comment for tree permits, requiring an arborist report be conducted by the town consulting arborist for tree removal permit applications, and defining the town consulting arborist. So that was the notice that was provided, posted in your agenda for purposes of the Brown Act. That's what limits the discussion, but you can always provide other direction, and staff will make a note of that and bring it back in the future.
is it appropriate to make that direction after we move this ordinance through?
Yes.
Thank you. So, Mayor, I appreciate that. Thank you. So that's answered my question. That's why I support this ordinance. I think we need to move the process forward. There's some protections in this ordinance, hiring the town arborist, and then having a process for the arborist to review applications. And I don't think we should wait on that. But I am very sympathetic with, and after we're finished this, would support staff moving forward quickly on clarifying language, even though I appreciate the town attorney's kind of review of the term and how a word that's maybe broadly used in our ordinance is defined afterwards by trees that should be reviewed, but don't include the large prominent trees I was talking about. So I support the ordinance. Thank you. And I'm sorry, that was a motion. I'm not sure. I guess
We have a motion and a second, and now we're doing a couple rounds of questions or comments. Councilmember Tripp.
I won't repeat myself, but I would reiterate that I definitely would like, I'm going to support this motion in particular so that we can have a consulting arborist. But I hope, I don't know if we need a motion specifically or direction will help. But yes, this whole issue of, I'm really strongly in favor of no tree over a certain size be removed without a permit. And so I would like to see that come back. And I would actually avoid pyrophyte discussion. I would kind of agree with what I think our consulting arborist suggested, which is no tree over a certain size should come down without going through the permit process, so that there would not be an exemption for an exemption being you don't have to get a permit if it's a Monterey pine or a redwood of any size. So I just want to be really clear on that I'd like to see that come back. So, but I am going to support this motion.
And once we get this, discuss this motion and take a vote, I'm going to ask for direction to staff for future. So just so you kind of know the kind of plan, because I want to make sure staff is clear, which is part of the discussion about the motion versus future direction.
May I ask a question, Mayor? I wanted to be sure for the motion we don't need to press a button, because I think you suggested, Eric, press the button to make a motion, because I want to follow the rules. Motions, we don't push the button, right?
No, he was talking about something else, and I just wanted to, he was talking, and he wanted to know if we wanted to make a motion. So that's a discussion
item.
Got it. So that's when I was getting everyone kind of used to when and where. So, but not during the motion, and because we just have a motion and a second, and we haven't had a vote yet. So, any other? Councilmember McKee can't.
Thank you very much. I am also in support of moving this through as is now. I do want clarification that the arborist report would go along with a notice to the neighbors within that 300-foot range. I think that's what ZDRB had recommended, and I think that would help the neighbors understand what's going on and why a tree is being deemed unhealthy or healthy.
So that would be the.
Yeah, I think we included. I mean, not that it would be circulated, but that the notice would include an attachment to the arborist report.
Okay, and then I'm supportive of that.
All right. So now we are.
Just as a reminder, you do push your buttons to vote.
Yes.
So if you're ready to vote, Eddie will switch over, and we'll your light should flash, and then it says it means it's ready.
Any final questions and comments? I too support this as written at this stage, considering our process, and really happy to have our new arborist in town and the beginning of the new process. So. With that, Eddie, I think we're ready to vote. I don't see any of the lights on, so everyone could hit your vote button. And
this passes unanimously, Mayor.
Huh?
This passed unanimously.
All right, thank you very much. So our clerk announced that this passed unanimously. And now we are going to give direction to staff. So can you just, again, kind of reiterate what type of direction that you're looking for.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Brad, Town Manager Ralston. I just wanted to, for clarification for staff, just for the purpose of that, utilizing our new town consulting arborist, I think it's good to consider that this could be a request for him to look into and report back on, opposed to making direct changes, providing his expertise opinion on certain topics like you've discussed in this meeting.
That was my, what I thought I conveyed to staff, but I will do that again, that right now, we've just passed this ordinance, we've discussed that, and so now we're going to be providing direction to staff about what other kind of changes we might like to see in the future. There's going to be a lot of staff involved, including our arborist, and there's no date certain for when that needs to come back. So is that?
And if I can just suggest an approach, because first of all, I think we've heard everything that's been said tonight, so I don't think anything needs to be reiterated in terms of what you've already stated. But I know Tony did. I asked him, would he like to get input, and the answer was yes. And so it might be easiest for him to, sort of request the input that you're seeking in order to come back, because we're going to lean on him to come back with whatever options might be available for the town. So to sort of frame that versus kind of have an open-ended conversation, I think would be useful. So if you could.
Yeah, it would be useful to have some sort of direction, and it's maybe like taking baby steps with the ordinance itself. My first impulse in reading it was I'd like to start at the beginning and go all the way through it and change it all. But I think that there are some aspects of it that certainly are good, and we should stick with those, and then we should work sort of diligently at improving it step by step. And I think that process is, it's good for me to go home and look at different types of ordinances, and I'm familiar with several of them anyways, and give some examples of small samples of those ordinances and how they would apply to our situation here in Yountville. And I think all of that would help. But from your viewpoint, if you can give me sort of guidance as to what you would like to see from me as the next step.
I just have a question for you. You said that you've looked at it thoroughly and you'd like to, start all over instead of just revising it. That's typically my approach. Sometimes it seems more straightforward to do that. But with that said, is there certain areas that we maybe could provide direction on that you could highlight? Is there anything that are major concerns for you?
Definitions. All right. And in an ordinance, the very first thing to do is to define your terms. And those definitions need to be exact and according to industrial standards and things like that. And I can help with that. But it's important to have all of those definitions first before you start going into different aspects of the ordinance. Just a simple example is define a tree. Okay, and it's not easy as you may think, but all of those kind of definitions come first, and I think that's a good start. And then when we change things in the ordinances, the terminology at least is understood.
And do you have a comment on? There's nothing in here about tree inventories. Is that something that should be part of an ordinance that we maybe do that routinely, or what we want to see maybe included in that inventory? Obviously, you're not going to go around in people's backyard and look at every tree or everybody's house and write them all down. But
I think that tree surveys are an important thing, and sometimes they're beyond, they're different from an ordinance, because oftentimes we get funding for a tree survey, and there's different avenues to get financing for it. And it's a big deal because then you have some idea of how many trees you have, who's taking care of them, and where they're located, location-wise, and also the identification of the species. Because our conversation earlier, is saying, well, I think it's a redwood. It scares me, right? Because we need to know exactly what tree we're talking about.
Okay, thanks. Councilmember Tripp.
So maybe this is a question for you, but also for Gary and our town manager. Is there really anything that stops us from starting over, using sort of the best practice, state-of-the-art ordinance here in California on trees? And granted, it would have to be fit into our Muni code, so it might require some changes, and we might want to change stuff. But I find tinkering with existing ordinances, especially if you're making large changes, you get a kind of mishmash ordinance. So I don't know. I guess that would be a question in my mind. We want to achieve certain things. Is there anything stopping us from having a whole new ordinance on trees?
No.
Well, Gary might want to speak to this first, but
I think the only thing I would say, obviously legally you can start fresh and do whatever you want. I do think there's a long history, of course, of trees in Yountville. I think, generally speaking, it's I'll call it a very positive history. I know that there's been some issues and some things we're trying to address. So I would trust Tony to be able to make sure whatever we're replacing is replaced, but sometimes, those are the things I would just caution you on as a whole do-over, unless there was almost like a true comparison of like, this is now here, that is now. Connecting the dots can be hard. But I'm not saying, and I think if Tony was advising, like, let's start over, let's start with, pick a town, where he views it to be a more modern ordinance, as long as Gary, and then I would look at the planning, building staff as well as the public works staff, because I do think one key issue or one key distinction that we need to consider here are the town trees. Because I don't know how many trees we have, but we have a lot of trees, and we clearly have to maintain them. And there's an operational aspect to that that John and the public works staff oversees. So that would be the one thing I would want to make sure whatever we're proposing, we're comfortable. And if we needed to add operational costs, that's another question for you all. But those are things you need to consider.
Councilmember Reeves.
I just wanted to add a couple of things when you're talking about language and definitions. I also would like to clarify the exceptions to at least make it understandable that an emergency removal is different than a removal, so that whoever's looking at the ordinance sees that, oh, I'm not an emergency, I have to apply for a permit. So I also reiterate the idea that all trees should be protected above a certain DBH, and that that be really clear to people, because the way the ordinance is right now, it's really questionable whether, oh, do I fit in this category, or does my tree lie somewhere else? I think it would streamline an ordinance a lot just to have everything is protected above this size. And also I would like to have some language in a tree ordinance that talks about the importance of trees, not just for their aesthetic value, but for their climate mitigation value, and the fact that maybe all trees need to be protected to protect us, so that the language sort of supports people in making the right decision of not cutting down something on a Sunday afternoon when there's no law in town, right? So I think making it part of our community responsibility to protect and maintain trees that are on our property and that are on our communal land, so that we establish this urban forest that gets us to more sustainable area and more aesthetic area as the final goal. And the way you get to it is to be more cognizant of our responsibility to trees.
So just to say, I kind of mostly agree with everything you said, and part of an ordinance usually it will include the tree benefits and not just aesthetics, but all sorts of things, the fact that we have to breathe and trees provide us with oxygen, but also even economic things that increases property value, the sink for carbon sequestering, the water. I can go on and on and on. And there's a lot of, and I think an ordinance needs to have that as the front, as the introduction, and also the appreciation that the society and that your community should have for trees should be mentioned in there as well. Just have to caution you on one little thing, is that sometimes a tree needs to come out because it is a bad character, all right? It needs that it prevents other trees and other plants from growing and things like that. So it's not always cut and clear that every tree needs to be saved and not taken out.
Right. That's why we have you.
I appreciate that.
Vice Mayor Knight.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to tell a big thank you to our planning officer, Ms. Price, for all the work you did. And so I'm sorry in some ways, I'm sorry I didn't bring up this question about the pyrophytes before, but life goes on and we're busy. And so thank you for the work you did listening to the ZDRB meeting and to the work to prepare for us. This is a very good ordinance, and thank you for that. And I also want to say, I just listening to the new town arborist, I appreciate I can sense and I appreciate your expertise. And so while I support the comments that Councilmember Reeves and Councilmember Tripp have said, I really would lean on your expertise and would hope you'd first take a look at our ordinance and maybe make changes first that we need to make to, and it may be in the exceptions portion of the chapter, but I look forward to your recommendations and improvements. I think we've talked about, like everything that we're doing in this community, is we want to have the town and our ordinances reflect the most sustainable and resilient policies, and I know we'll do better in this ordinance with the work and the suggestions you'll make. So thank you.
Any final informational comments to staff? Seeing none, we will now move on to our only administrative item. This is considering adoption of resolution approving a special event permit. Can we get a staff report, please?
There we go. Hello, Town Council, Mayor. Thank you. Kendra Bruno, Co-Compliance Officer. Hopefully the second time and only time you see me recently. So in front of you, agenda item 11A is a consideration to adopt the resolution approving the special event Bouchon Bistro application, specifically closing Washington Street for their 25th anniversary celebration on Saturday, October 14th. This closure would take place from 2 p.m. to 12 a.m., the event taking place from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m., with a sound amplification already approved for the 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. time. As you can see in the attachments, there is a draft permit that includes this street closure. Included, the sound amplification has already been permitted, so what's before council is the actual street closure, not the special event itself. While reviewing this event and working with the applicants who are here, if you have any additional questions and if they have anything to say afterwards, we worked with the Sheriff Department, CAL FIRE. As you can see, they did a whole separate COA for this special event, due especially because of the street closure, as well as Public Works and Parks and Rec. The applicants have submitted a traffic management plan. It is included in the attachments with the permit itself, and it shows flaggers for the pedestrians. Only one side of the street in regards to the sidewalk will be closed. The sidewalk for Estate Yountville will be open. The detour has traffic going down Yount Street. So if you're coming in from California, you would, I don't know, north-south, I apologize. I already get in trouble all the time for this.
That's south.
South, thank you. You would go down Yount Street, and then traffic would be diverted to Humboldt Street if coming the opposite way. The town is also requiring the use of the signage boards as part of the use permit, and that will help deter traffic or allow traffic to know prior to actually hitting the detour that they will be detoured. So, trying to think what else. The parking plans and restrictions have been reviewed by both the Sheriff Department and myself in the municipal code. Per the municipal code, for any sort of full restaurant of that size, it is a 42 parking space requirement, and that has been secured by their parking at Edwards Courtyard as well as Heston Vineyards. So that has been taken into account. With the applicants, we've already discussed the Sheriff Department condition that deliveries will not stop or block traffic on Washington Street, especially on October 13th prior for setup. And they are using Traffic Management Incorporated that will assist with all of the traffic control measures that will need to be in place for this to go forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions from, first, I'm going to give the applicant an opportunity. Would you like to speak now or just in response to questions? Okay, please.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Jared Love. I'm with the Thomas Keller Group. I just wanted to touch on this event isn't for generating profit. It's to celebrate those who have been a huge part of the success of this restaurant. We're excited to celebrate our 25th anniversary, as we had touched on here. I think for members of myself who look at hospitality as a profession, this kind of represents a pretty monumental opportunity for restaurants and hospitality as a whole. So the idea is to merely invite those who have either contributed to the success or been a part of our restaurant for the 25 years we've been established. And so I thought that was important to know. This isn't an idea to produce revenue.
And I have a question while you're up. It says in the staff report that your event's going to start at 5 p.m. With my understanding, it was 6 p.m.
Yes. So we anticipate guests to arrive slightly earlier than maybe the 6 o'clock time. Our goal is to have the event set from the 2 p.m. Start to have it ready for 5 p.m. arrival. We don't expect to begin that way, but I did want to make sure that we didn't underestimate our start time versus overestimate.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any questions of the applicant from the council? We can give you
for sitting through our conversation.
That's
on trees and everything. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for the consideration.
And I just have one question for staff, myself. Staff expressed some concerns regarding that this might set a precedent for future requests, and I'm just kind of wondering what you base that on when the last one was almost a decade ago.
Just general conversations that have taken place internally, and when mention of this request coming forward in front of additional businesses, they were excited about the possibility of what that could mean. One specific business actually highlighted the olden days for when Washington Street was closed for the holidays, like Christmas tree lighting and that kind of stuff. So I think that's the only reason that it was addressed in that manner in the staff report.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Questions, Councilmember Tripp?
Thank you for the good detail in the report, very helpful. So I just wanted to clarify, the reason this is coming before the council is the street closure. The rest, and maybe you said that. But.
That is correct. Just the street closure is coming before council. The rest of the special event has been approved.
And would normally be administratively approved.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And it's a great event. I mean, in past years, the street wasn't closed, but just in general. And so I want to just acknowledge that the community really enjoys this event. So thank you.
Just for clarification on that, this isn't an annual event. This is a 25th anniversary. Can you come up to the mic and differentiate this event and the community and Bastille Day, which I think Councilmember Tripp.
We've always celebrated our anniversary. They've always been very important to us, but those are done internally in the restaurant itself as it pertains to individuals who join us that evening. But I think what you're referring to is Bastille Day, which is a festival that we host annually in July. So most closely to the 14th, but this one would not include a road closure annually.
Is it a public event?
This one, it's meant to be on an invitation. We don't want this to be a tourism, or marketing celebration. It's mainly made to pay tribute to the restaurant turning 25 years old and celebrating those who have made that impact on that space for the last 25 years. So.
And I apologize for not remembering when Bastille Day was, but my comment still stands. We really appreciate, as a resident, I appreciate all that you do.
Thank you very much. We enjoyed doing that event as well.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor Knight, you have questions?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. So I was just looking at the map. Thank you, Ms. Bruno, for your report. And so the diversion is going south Humboldt, down Yount, and going north Yount, and then coming and so all the signage will bring the traffic back to Washington, going north or south on Humboldt, I guess. So my first question would be: there are a few residents on Yount from the Y to Humboldt, and then around onto Humboldt. Will the applicant or the town give them a notice just to alert them to the traffic flow change? Or
that's a great question. One of the conditions of approval is notification to neighbors within 250 feet. What we can do as an additional change, any sort of impacts based on the detour, we can have those addresses alerted as well through a notification.
250 feet goes a long ways in this town.
It really does,
It probably
yes.
reaches from Bouchon to the corner of Yount and Humboldt. So that's good. I mean, the impact on this, I support this application, and I supported the event in 2014, but at this particular location, there's less impact. And so the only thing I would suggest is contact Napa Valley Transportation Authority, because in 2014, the A bus was running down Jefferson, and so letting them know that reminding their drivers that they have this diversion on Saturday would be good too, that they're aware ahead of time. So, thank you.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
You might hear that bus doesn't run on Saturday, especially this time, but
okay.
you can check with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm just a board member. I don't know as much detail as their staff does, like you
okay.
guys. So.
Well, in terms of also letting we have the B bus and the A, and I'm not sure you're right now if they are currently running Saturday, the Up Valley bus, but thank you if you'll let them know.
Most definitely. Thank you.
Councilmember Reeves, questions?
Yeah, I have a question about the staff report. There was a comment that the street closure can't block deliveries. Do you mean that before the 3 o'clock point?
Deliveries prior, so the day before on October 13th is what's spelled out, just due to their expectation of setup is for deliveries is October 13th, so the day before the special event. And there has been issues in the past with all businesses on Washington Street when something is going to occur the next day and there's additional deliveries, that Washington Street is blocked at certain times of the day. And so the Sheriff's Department has called that out to make sure that doesn't occur again.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember McKee-Cant.
Well, I actually just answered my own question. It was regarding notifying, and working with businesses like Bartisono and what is it, Four Sisters Hotel and such, and for their deliveries as well as their guests on the day of the event. It looks like you've got that covered, so thank you.
Okay, with that, I'm going to take public comment. Do we have any public comment? I see our Chamber of Commerce is coming to talk to us.
I've waited diligently for the opportunity. Whitney Diver McAvoy, President and CEO of the Yountville Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for having this item before you this evening. I think we're all excited about celebrating Bouchon's 25-year anniversary. It's a tremendous accomplishment, especially for restaurants over the past 3 years and the turbulence that they've gone through. So I think closing the street for this allows it to be a little bit more special for them. So I appreciate your openness and willingness to do this. I think the Bouchon team has worked really well with staff to make sure that all the bases are covered. They were really communicating with us as well to make sure that they asked all the right questions. So it was a really good teamwork all the way around. And just to put everybody at ease, the Yountville Chamber has no intention of closing down any part of the street anytime in the future for any type of longing festival or things of that nature. So I can put you at ease for that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else like to make public comment? Seeing nobody but the applicants. With that, I am going to bring it back to council to ask for verbally a motion and a second, and then we will debate the motion. We are looking at a resolution that is number 2342-32.
Ms. Mayor?
Yes?
I'd like to move adoption of resolution number 23-4232, approving the special event Bouchon Bistro application to close Washington Street for their 25th anniversary celebration on Saturday, October 14th.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Okay. With that, it's time to discuss the motion. Or nobody's got their light on, so I'm in full support of this. It's just thank you very much, Bouchon, for being there. You have a great place to pop in for a cocktail, and now I know that if I have a special anniversary or birthday, book early. So, but congratulations on your success. So I'm certainly going to support this as well.
It's hard to believe it's been 25 years that Bouchon has been there, so it's amazing.
Councilmember Reeves.
I just wanted to add also that 25 years is a big milestone. My husband and I had a business where the bakery is for 25 years, and that was all we could do, so good luck. But I definitely support this, not only for Bouchon, but also I think events, special events that celebrate our community and Bouchon as part of our community need to be observed. And it enlivens the town, which is what we're looking for. I think the town could feel a lot more hip and fun. So, yes, thank you.
Councilmember McKee Camp.
Thank you. I echo exactly what Councilmember Reeves was going to say, and then aren't we lucky? We're so lucky as a community, and not only will it enliven the sense of fun and hipness, our pride. So, and I already know that the wheels are turning for lots of press releases afterwards. I mean, this is a great spotlight to put on our community, so thank you.
And just a final comment from me before I ask for the vote. In practical terms, we don't really have that much traffic. It's not like we're really going to be putting a lot of people out. Thank gosh for Yount Street. We've got a nice little detour there. I think it's really not going to be too problematic. It'll probably be more discussion about what was going on next door than there will be complaints about the traffic, quite frankly. So with that, I will call for the vote.
Sorry, Mayor, that passes unanimously.
Okay, so congratulations, Jared. Please send our word to Thomas that he had a unanimous vote from the town council to do what we can to at least close the street to support your special event.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. And with that, item number 12, staff presentation and informational reports.
There's no reports.
Okay. And we are moving on to council external meetings. LAFCO met yesterday, and we had approved an MSR for the Napa County Regional Conservation District. It's on our website, and I know people don't really rush off to read MSRs, but if you have some time, this is really amazing. It's about how much the Resource Conservation District does for this valley. It covers the whole valley except a little island in Napa, and that's going to get fixed too. But the amount of partnerships they have and the amount of grants and everything that they really do, it was an eye-opener for me. So it's at least pull it up and look at the executive summary. It's really an amazing organization. So that's the only one I've been to in the last couple of weeks. Any other council meetings you've attended? Councilmember Reeves.
We attended, Town Manager Ralston and I and Eric Knight attended the 2x2 meeting at the Unified School District, and we didn't talk all that much, but certainly we got a lot of information about the Unified School District, but we did ask for more information about our Yountville students who are attending various schools, and I hope that you got the information emailed to you. Did it go to everyone?
I know I received it. If
we could,
have you received
I
it?
could forward it.
I could forward it to. I'll forward it to the whole council.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just telling how many students go to what schools and how many children are bused. And we did discuss them sort of taking a more proactive look at after-school care at Willow Elementary School, because it would appear that they have such a long waiting list that they're not able to accommodate a lot of our children. So, and possibly there's room for us to try to figure something out for them or with them about after-school programs. But I think the gist of it is we're going to discuss how often we should meet. But for us as a community, it's one question they didn't answer, which was what kind of movement has happened when children went to a certain school. are they still in that school or have they moved? Are they finding a place in Napa schools to feel comfortable in? And I think that would be an interesting statistic to know, and also for us to keep abreast of sort of the climate situation of busing. They have provided busing for the elementary school children. I think 20 or something take advantage of that, but there are 60 children from K through 12 that go to Napa schools, and wouldn't it be more cost effective and climate effective if there were a bus that got them there rather than individual cars? So those are maybe subjects we can look at again, or at the next meeting, whatever that is. We don't know.
Any other meeting reports?
Briefly, Mayor, the mayor and I, we attended the last Napa Valley Transportation Authority meeting, and so it was a fairly brief meeting, but we will, the board is reviewing a Measure T road tax to extend that, and so probably late this year or early next year, we will, the town staff and the council will be reviewing a potential measure that will be on the ballot next November, in November of '24. And then we got a report on just the Vine Transit, and the traffic on the bus and public transportation is coming back. It's slow, but there's more use in Yountville and all over the valley. So that's all for Napa Valley Transportation Authority.
And the number 10 is now going up to the Veterans Home. So.
Right, and that's helped our numbers too, that they are traveling there. Yes, thank you.
And there's still big issues with driver shortages. So,
Mayor,
yes.
One more report on the Climate Action Committee. We did meet, and I think there was much discussion about the action part of climate action, and so we are hoping to get a report and a something to bring back on charging facilities, and there is grant money available for that, and if we move quickly enough, possibly we could all apply through a county application. And also the idea of reach codes and not reinventing the wheel, and just trying to discuss the possibility of adopting the sort of level 1 or 2 green reach codes above what we already have. So that might be coming soon.
Okay. Any final reports? Attorney Bell, do we have a closed session?
So there was a special meeting that began at noon. That meeting was continued until after your second special meeting or after this regular meeting. So this regular meeting can be adjourned now. You can then go back into closed session with the continued meeting from noon, or you can also adjourn that meeting and we can bring those items back. Defer to this council on how you'd like to proceed.
So we can adjourn and go. We're going to adjourn and we're going to go into closed session. Do we expect any reportable action?
We do not.
We do not. Okay. With that, I would like to get a motion and a second to adjourn to our Tuesday, October 17th, 3 p.m. regular town council meeting.
I move we adjourn.
A second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. That passes unanimously. All right, so let's take a break before we could go into closed session. And whenever you're back, it's fine. So I'm not giving you a time limit. So.
It's frozen. Oh, you've been like going,
well, because it was after 3 o'clock.
I had to go in.
I know.
You're right. I lagged especially for some of us. Thank you.
I'll spend more time.
It was 5 minutes.
Just call the meeting.
I'm just sharing my feelings. I was
Okay.
really